world over. Green morning, green afternoon, green evening. We hope you are taking care of yourself, your family, your friends, your neighbors, your community, your society, your civilization. Ladies and gentlemen, in the different time zones, in the different countries, in the different continents, when you're watching this particular program, first of all, those are in India, it's a belated Shubh Deepavali. The people, those are celebrating now at present, somewhere it's a morning, somewhere it's a afternoon, somewhere it's a evening, and somewhere it's a late evening for all of us. So we extend a very warm welcome to all of us. Those are having a confluence of the best of these cerebrums from world over. So ladies and gentlemen, today is the 332nd webinar. During this pandemic, 331 webinars we have already conducted, and there are three words which we revolve around: making education relevant. What is the purpose of education? Why to take education? Why to go to school? Why to go to college? Why to go to university? Why to acquire particular skill? What exactly are we learning from these institutions? And what exactly the corporate sector is thinking? Why all the time it is there that there's a skills gaps, and corporate always complains about it. The breed which is coming to me is not desirable, it's not consumable, it is not acceptable. So well, that's a part of it. And they say we got to retune them, we got to refurbish them, and then we got to take on them. Well, 29th of July 2020 at 4 p.m. in the evening, there was a wonderful announcement: New Education Policy 2020 after 34 years in India. If we recollect and recapitulate 1968, the first part, and then 1986, then the minor changes in 1992, and thereafter now coming the New Education Policy 2020, where no arts, no commerce, no science, all compartments being removed. And Asha Bhonsle ji, the great playback singer, giving a call to the government: I'm so happy that now the science student can take a music and the commerce student can take fashion designing. So that's wow factor. That's what they conveyed. And right from the sixth class, the children taking coding, children going for vocationals, children going for skills, they're going to corporate houses. And earlier we used to call curricular, extracurricular, co-curricular, all being removed now. Everything is the integral part of your education ecosystem. When you talk about it, it means even if you're having a dance or a music or an art or an exhibition or cultural display or sport activity or some other activity, that will be counted towards your academics and academic performance. So ladies and gentlemen, with the global confluence of intellectual with our brothers and sisters from the world over, this evening we have got four distinguished brothers, our Indian diaspora, and we are moving in this family: education, research, skills, technology, and entrepreneurship. And today in the New Education Policy 2020, we are going to talk about creating a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship in India. So Sunday, 15th of November 2020, we extend a very hearty welcome to Dr. Kabir Sen, Professor of Marketing, Lamar University, Texas, USA. A very warm welcome, hearty welcome, pleasure to have you with us this evening. Dr. Srinivas Palankiji, the Professor of Chemical Engineering, Lamar University, Texas, USA. A very warm welcome, hearty welcome, pleasure to have you. Dr. Purunendu Mandalji, Professor of Management, Lamar University, Texas, USA. We extend a very warm welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, this golden triangle is being brought together with the efforts of Dr. Vivek Shankar Natarajan, Professor of Marketing, Lamar University, Texas. It's a great day, it's a great welcome, it's a great morning, great afternoon, and a great evening. And nowadays we call it, during pandemic, green morning, green afternoon, and green evening. Everything should be green, green, and green, all the places, whatsoever we have got. Now our chamber since 1994, International Chamber for Service Industry, having the confluence of the non-resident Indians, Indian corporate houses, and of course the government interface, where from time to time We have been giving a lot of roadmaps, white papers, policy frameworks, and couple of inputs so that we can empower this service industry. From India, we always believe Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. That means the whole world is one family. The whole globe, your difficulties are, that is everybody's difficulty. Together we got to take on. So heartiest congratulations for the new education policy 2020. We are going to talk about education, knowledge, time, success, research, learning, entrepreneurship, and self-employment. The Honorable Prime Minister of India, through this new education policy, wants to make India self-reliant. Atmanirbhar Bharat, the road journey ahead, how it has to move, which are the strong pillars, what India is thinking, how India is growing, what India is becoming, and how it has to become self-reliant. We got to remain positive, think positive, talk positive, walk positive, dream positive, and all the time positivity all around. Making education accessible and relevant for all, because the education which is being imparted, how it should be accessible to everyone and how it should become relevant to everyone. Of course, all the time when we talk to the corporate, they convey that, well, there are certain skill gaps. So skills to competencies, when we talk about, ladies and gentlemen, nowadays when we are talking about it, our chamber is working extensively and quite in a detail. The fifth edition of our chamber is coming very soon. You can see, because we are proud to say, without taking single rupee from anybody, whether in India or overseas, no money being taken from anyone, from our own resources, from our own sources, from our own expertise, we set up India's first finishing school network for the service industry. Because there are three pillars, everybody knows about it: agriculture, manufacturing, and services. Our focus is totally on a services sector, education beyond employment, entrepreneurship. That is the way we got to work onto it. That is the mission, that is the objective. And in this particular finishing school, creative thinking, critical thinking, decision making, and a lot of value additions being done, because the soft skills and the hard skills when we talk about, because I come from the armed forces background, and always etiquettes, manners, gesture, body language, positive thinking, communication skills, articulation, that is something very important, because unless you do not have the good communication skills, you cannot impart what do you want to tell. That is something very important. So quite a bit of efforts being put in. The impact of technology also coming in a very big way in the finishing school. Education and innovative learning approaches, not teaching, learning approaches. That is the focus of the new education policy also. Gamification, when we talk about positive games, constructive games, creative games, and music therapy, very, very important. Last 8 years, we are doing the research on that. This slide is the most important to all of us. Those are joining for the first time, and those are meeting us for the first time from the world over. I wish to discuss with all my brothers and sisters world over what exactly the chamber is doing Monday to Sunday. It is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all the days together. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 4 days, teachers and youth empowerment. It is with the education, and it is under the aegis where we take the sector skill councils of Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, Government of India. Friday evening, 5 p.m., we take you to Singapore, water management strategies, where lots of expertise from the world over having a confluence, and it is being done by Mr. Anil Manocha, our senior advisor, who is talking, working, planning, everything taken care of water management strategies. And then on Saturday, right from Chicago, right from New York, couple of other places, Swami Vivekanand's, the education and youth empowerment, how it has to be done. And then on Sunday, just before this program, we had 2 hours marathon that was on micro, small, and the medium enterprise, startups, self-employment, and entrepreneurship. Every Saturday evening, you've got a special program that is on Ayurveda, yoga, meditation, naturopathy, nutrition, and whatsoever is to be done for your positive thought process and positive living. Because at this point of time, when you talk about mental pressure, anxiety, stress, depression. Couple of challenges are there during the COVID-19. And Sunday morning, the Universal Studio gates open up right from the Woodbury University, Burbank, California, Los Angeles. We get Professor Satinder Dhiman, who comes live, that is 1.5 hour, Srimad Bhagavad Gita and India's principal Upanishad every Sunday morning, 1.5 hours. And then Sunday evening at 3 p.m., we go to ASEAN, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, Brunei, all the 10 countries together, 650 million people together, because from India, the Buddhism traveled all the way to ASEAN. At the same time, when you talk about northeast part of India, when you have got the boundary wall, can you imagine how many patients are coming from Myanmar to Manipur every day for treatment? And similar way, a couple of other things which are done between India and ASEAN. And now we are working in the direction student exchange, cultural exchange, faculty exchange, research exchange. Couple of things being worked out all the places right over there with Singapore, with couple of other countries. Then comes Sunday evening, and this is the most prestigious program. That is the New Education Policy 2020. What are Indian diaspora and the non-resident Indians? Those are from the education ecosystem. We should understand what exactly they wish to convey to empower the Indian education ecosystem. As the new education policy conveys that 100 top universities to be invited from abroad, they have to come to India, they got to set up the campus, digital technology, flipped learning, and blended learning, whatsoever we want to talk about. Now, most of the program, because they go overseas, they are in English. So on a special demand, 400 million youth. There is a program in Hindi at 12:30, Monday to Friday. Monday to Friday. 12:30 to 1:30, it is in Hindi every day for youth empowerment. So this is the complete canvas, what Chamber is doing during this COVID from 25th of March. Youth empowerment and our teachers empowerment. These are the two priority areas what we have taken, ladies and gentlemen. And during this COVID-19, all the research from 152 countries which we gathered, our chamber from its own sources, resources, our advisors world over. The first part is the basic food, agriculture and organic, that part has to be taken care of, and that is blended with the animal husbandry. So agriculture, animal husbandry. So that is the first part. Second is your health, herbal, and your wellness, that part is taken. And third is your digital education and your e-learning. And the world has to get back to now B2B, no more business to business. It is back to basics, sustainable development, which we have to take care of. We have recommended to the government of India, various ministries, and at the same time to the Indian corporate, come forward, education to be given the priority, and the 2% what you spend of the CSR, various corporate houses in India, next 5 years, let's spend on education empowerment. 500 top corporate, they should contribute towards education, and government of India to provide seamless connectivity as far as the bandwidth and as far as the basic equipment and all that apparatus which has to be given to all those children. Those are not in metros, but those are into far-flung areas. So that is the thing. And then, of course, at the same time, getting the valuable inputs of the non-resident Indians. It could be in form of technology, it could be in form of advice, it could be in form of research, it could be in form of some networking. And at the same time, Government of India, Ministry of Education should invite a confluence of at least 100 top best brains of the world, Indian brains of the world, those have gone. They can come on a short assignment, 6 months, 1 year, whatsoever time is available with them, and they can help to empower the Indian education ecosystem. अगर भारत को पुनः विश्वगुरु बनना है, if India has to become the global study destination, then what all has to be done? I'm not running down, I'm just not underestimating the people, those have come from overseas and studying at present in India, but I think the focus has to be widened and we have to get from some other countries as well. And when we get back to the Indian ancient value system in education, भारत में क्या था, ऐसा क्या था, ऐसी ancient value का education system क्या था? There were 10,000 students from the world over and 2,000 acharya, and all of them together. And you talk about Nalanda, Takshila, Vikramshila, and a couple of other universities. There must have been something, and all subjects being taught over there. Something must have been done. This slide disturbs quite a bit, and I see it again and again, because I want to be a humble student. On 2nd of February 1835, when Lord Macaulay, he addressed the British Parliament and he said, I have traveled across the length and breadth of India and I have not seen one person who is beggar, who is a thief. Such wealth I have never seen in this country. Such high moral values, people of such caliber, that I do not think we would ever conquer this country unless we break the very backbone of this nation, which is there, that means India's spiritual and cultural heritage. And therefore, I propose that we replace her old and ancient education system, her culture, for if the Indians think that all that is foreign and English is good and greater than their own, they will lose their self-esteem, their native culture, and they will become what we want them, a truly dominated nation. That's what was conveyed on 2nd of February 1835. Ladies and gentlemen, whatsoever human mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. This is the time. Let's get together. Let's empower the education ecosystem, making education relevant. This chamber, right from 25th March, we have got motivators, technocrats, counselors, wellness experts, corporate, government administrators, and decision makers together on this forum. From time to time, we are trying to get everybody together, getting the best of thoughts. The chamber invites panelists and suggestions. It can be sent on our email, or we are available for the WhatsApp also any point of time as and when it's needed. This evening, a great welcome, hearty welcome, pleasure to have Dr. Srinivas Palankiji, the Regional Director, and as I introduced you earlier, Dr. Kabir Senji, Professor of Marketing, Dr. Purnenduji Mandal Sahab, Professor of Management. They all are joining us from the United States. And ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Vivek Shankar Natarajan, the Professor of Marketing. I request him, and ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming these dignitaries this evening to take on the journey forward. And all of us together, we will share the vision, the ideas, and cerebrum, whatsoever we can do to empower the new education policy, and whatsoever is the way forward we can take. Dr. Vivek Shankarji, kindly unmute your mic and you can take on the journey onward from here.
Well, warm good evening or good morning to those of us in the US, and good evening to all my friends in Bharat. If you just and happy Diwali ki shubhkamnaएं. Now, if you kind of read the history of trade, one of the things they say is India was Sone ki chidiya. We used to be the preferred place to export spices, and but now, if in the last few decades, if you look at what has been the biggest decade from India, has been the exporting of talent, and especially one brand is so synonymous with talent in India, which is so made its ways into a lot of parts of the world. So that is the IIT brand. And so today we are joined by a golden triangle, and in fact the area we live in is also called Golden Triangle. It's very interesting that you use that word, Dr. Sharma. So we have Dr. Kabir Sen, Dr. Purnendu Mandal, and Dr. Palanki. All of them are IITians. They are all they've all come to the US, got their PhDs, and they've all been successful leaders in US academia, researchers. And the common thread is, how can we create a system of innovation and entrepreneurship, especially in the context of new education policy, because the landscape is interesting with AI and servitization of services. There's going to be a lot of automation. And the only way you can increase the jobs is through innovation. And so there is a lot of pressing need for that. So with that, that's a focus for my panel. And each of them will bring their own unique life experience. So I over to them without much ado. So first and foremost, the floor is yours, Dr. Sen.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Casey, and just for the record, Dr. Sen is also a good quizzer. So maybe to check if audience is watching, you could ask them a couple of trivia questions, which is kind of your style.
Well, my talk will probably have a little bit of that. Part of my experience has been, I was fortunate enough to be called as a judge for an entrepreneurial competition at Texas A&M. And on the way back, my colleagues and I, one of them thought, let's start a similar competition at our Lamar University. And I've been comparing notes between some of the entrants at Texas A&M and some of the entrants at our university. And I find that both excel in different ways. An example, Texas A&M, one of the prize-winning entrants were by two PhD students. They look like your typical TV scientist, bow ties and everything, very, very prim and proper. They invested their money to buy a 3D printer, learned how it works, and made a prosthetic for returning vets, which was cheaper than the ones available on the market. And I got to talking with them, and my old, very old stuff, which I didn't even know that I knew from IIT, came in. Because I'm a metallurgist, that is my BTech in. And there are two concepts in metals, which I hope I'm getting right: creep and fatigue. Creep is if you put a steel rod and put very lightweight stuff on there, in a million years, it might bend a little bit. Fatigue is if you have a hammer and keep on hitting the hammer after some time, the head might break. So in one, you have very low stress, but continuous stress. And the other, you have intermittent high stress. And I said, have you thought of, in these prosthetic feet, which one needs high creep values and which one needs high fatigue values? And we had a very good conversation. But it was very theoretical based. At Lamar University, the prize-winning entry was by a fireman who, because he was in the line of duty, he could combine his practical needs into creating a product which was not coming from any theory, but from his own practice. And I think good entrepreneurship needs a combination of both. I do not know whether this story is true, but how did vaccination arrive? Well, there's a British or an English nursery rhyme about pretty maids. Who are the pretty maids? What was their profession? They were milkmaids. Jenner saw, and they were not pretty in the sense that they were good looking, but their skin was unblemished. And Jenner noticed that, and he felt that probably working with cows gave them some sort of resistance to the pox which hit the other villagers. And so his practical knowledge and his theoretical knowledge got combined into creating a vaccine. The word is from vacus, which is from cows. So we need a combination of theoretical and empirical knowledge. And sometimes we are very, very snobbish about where that empirical knowledge can come from. I think the Kolkata or the Calcutta race course, the main street is named after a British scientist who discovered quinine, which cures malaria. And he discovered that it came, and it was very instrumental in reducing the chance of catching malaria. In fact, the British picked up tonic water and made it mandatory in their barracks that gin and tonic became the drink to have. But I read that some Amazon rainforest Natives, long time back, 500 years back, knew about that it came from the bark of a tree. And Western civilization didn't even bother about it, although a Jesuit priest had given the knowledge to them in France. So sometimes the knowledge can come from sources which you are probably not willing to accept. And I think I could contrast this. Again, these stories could be untrue, but I read that Darwin got many of his ideas when he was taken as the companion of the captain of the HMS Beagle when they were touring the Galapagos Island and all that. I knew that. But then I read that the reason why he was picked as the companion was the captain was a devout Bible lover, a Christian, but he knew every word of the Bible by heart, but he was also a scientist. He had created the first barometer and all that. And Darwin had just graduated from Cambridge Divinity School, and he felt that they would get along like a house on fire. Never happened. Darwin's evolutionary theory went completely counter to the captain of the ship. So they had a falling out, and the captain of the ship, although he was a very talented scientist, had a very sad ending to his life. So he couldn't accept the evolutionary theory because it ran counter to his preconceived beliefs, which came from the good book. Contrast this with George W. Hardy, who got Srinivas Ramanujam to the UK. And when he asked for how he got the proofs, the answer was a goddess came to him and gave him these proofs in his dreams. George W. Hardy was a complete atheist. He was an absolute, if I could use the word, devout atheist, but that didn't stop him from being a friend of Ramanujan. And I therefore give this example as you should be open to where the ideas come from, evaluate them, but don't let it only come from one source. So what Dr. Sharma just said, break up the silos. It could come from a discipline which you might not consider science. It could come from a culture which you might not think too much of. And I think that will open the fountain of knowledge even more in innovation and creating new products. Thank you.
Casey, thank you for that wonderfully, let me start my video. Thank you for that great introduction. A lot of capsule of history and innovation and life experiences is in one capsular form. I'm sure we're going to come back to you with more questions and more conversations. Next would be Dr. Mandal. And Dr. Mandal, please talk about your experiences across countries too. That's something unique about your portfolio.
All right. Good morning and a good evening or suprabhat, whatever it is in Bengal, right? Okay. I have been a student for maybe 60 years and have been a professor only for last 30 years. Well, I had a very humble beginning, and then all the time I start learning new things. Now what I'm doing, I'm a professor in management, but I also try to practice that and see whether I can make life of few people much better. That's what my goal is. Let me tell you my beginning as such. See, as you know that as I was introduced, I am a product of IIT Kharagpur. And I had a chance to go to UK to do my doctorate. And that's way 1986, 89. And that time sitting in the UK, I was actually doing a national development planning for India. That was the topic of my PhD, national development planning. So that time the computer was new So what I could do is could apply, Vivek was talking about the system dynamics concept. We're trying to apply that control theory and all those things to a social systems, that in this case, national development planning. And we are trying to generate number of scenarios, what's likely to happen in 30 years time. I'm glad though some of those policies, what we simulated that time, it's, well, almost correct. That basically means that India will become a very, very successful nation in terms of all-round development. We generated a number of policies, try to see the land distribution, look at the investment, percentages investment going in industrial areas, in agricultural areas. So what I'm trying to say is a time. Time is a big factor. And during that time, I had the opportunity to look at what happened to India in the last 2000 years. Look at India was the most prosperous nation in the whole world. 2000 years ago, 30% of GDP was Indian. That's what, Sarmaji was quoting, that there was no beggar in India, right? And so what happened the last, when the foreigners came, especially the Britishers came, the richest country was transformed into poorest country. Luckily, in the last 70 years, we got back our glory. And only time will say what will happen in another few more years. Maybe year 2050 or so, will be much, much stronger, but I can see the path we are going. And in that context, I see that I was reading the national education policy. I could see that there is a lot of transition, and we could see a lot of good development there. At least the Indian policymakers, they are not focusing on quantity now, they are focusing on the quality and the lifelong learning. That's very important. So we have taken national infrastructure building focus in the beginning, and then we are basically working into developing or bettering everyone's life. Entrepreneurship come very long way there. In somewhere in this national development planning, we are saying that we need to focus on vocational education, which is basically my focus is. I have been an engineer, and I have seen when it comes to real nitty-gritty work, you need a lot of technicians, a lot of technical help. And when I moved to USA, particularly this place, Texas, we had difficulties in getting the real technical people in the region because I was involving with the communities here. So I saw why we do not build necessary infrastructure. So on my own, actually, I started to spare my educational time from professorship to developing a entrepreneurial college. And I'm proud to own a vocational college here, which is now nationally recognized, and the students get financial aid. So it's pretty getting strong. The greatest benefit for me there is the students get employed immediately after their education. As I've said in the beginning, that I have been a student for like 60 years, and I moved from one country to another country, from England to Australia to USA, and I spent a couple of years in Singapore. Sarmaji was mentioning about the ASEAN culture, ASEAN Institute. And in fact, I was a big part of that during my 2 years time in Singapore. we set up a conference, international conference on ASEAN development. And in fact, I produce or I set up a organization which actually produced a book, essentially. It's called Managing the ASEAN Century. Managing the ASEAN Century. So that's going all right. Good part of the initiative, what we started there is we're trying to help professors or the academics in that part of the world how to produce, how to publish their work. The whole idea is the Western education need to go to various places, okay, to those countries or to those universities where people are looking for ways of bringing up their quality in the education sector. And I perhaps will be able to give some kind of examples if I get into nitty-gritty, but at this stage perhaps I will leave it at that quite a bit of my own time goes into entrepreneurial development, the place where I go in. I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
I think next is Dr. Palanki. Again, very interesting background. He's worked across disciplines, and now he's kind of borderline. He's become a borderline management professor because he's consulting on how to improve small businesses through. And this is a grant funded by the United States government. So this is high level stuff. So there is a national competitiveness angle also. So I'm sure he can speak to that as well. So over to you, Dr. Palanki.
Sure, thank you. So I'm going to pick up on the theme that Dr. Sharma had originally mentioned about the Indian education system. And I'm going to take a step back from what Dr. Natarajan had said about I being from IIT Delhi. That's true. But my journey really began from a school that was across the street from IIT Delhi. So the school that I went to from kindergarten to 12th grade is called Mothers International School. And this is actually a school started in the spirit of Aurobindo Ghosh, who was a freedom fighter and revolutionary and so on. And then later on in his life, he became more of a yogi. So our school basically imbibed that philosophy. And, I went there from kindergarten to 12th grade. I had not gone to any other school. The only reason my parents sent me there was because it was near our house. And my dad's way of thinking was that if you miss the school bus, then you should be able to walk to school. So that's how that school was picked. And that time when I was there in Delhi, and I grew up in Delhi, the school was not that well known for its academics. Now, what they focused on was what Dr. Sharma originally called, the extracurricular or the co-curricular activities. And so we did things like, we had subjects actually in things like clay modeling. So we had so we basically the school hired a potter. He would come and teach us how to model with clay. This was like 5th grade, 4th grade, that level. They focused on painting, they focused on music, they focused on all this stuff. We focused on public speaking. We actually used to have competitions which have now become standard all across Delhi, and I think also across the nation. Extempore declamations, things like that. And I didn't know this was unusual. I just assumed everybody got this education, and I think the first time I found out this was not so common was when I had kids of my own. And, I was married by then. And then, my wife basically said she knew none of this, Now, the US follows more of this system, actually, as it turns out. My kids are, now they are in college. And so when they were in elementary school, middle school, high school, that's when I started to see, okay, these extracurriculars are actually part of the curriculum. And it sort of became my task to be the parent teacher at home, because my wife said, oh, we didn't do any of this in school. We just focused on, basically you go to school and you learn stuff. And at that time, if I think back to my educational system, the K through 12, the standard academic part was more like rote learning. And so when I transitioned to IIT, I think basically what we learned was how to get out of rote learning. I think you were respected if you knew your fundamentals. It's like, in that, at least in Delhi, they used to say, Funde clear hai kya? That's how they used to talk. And if you did something where you'd memorize something and were trying to regurgitate that wasn't considered cool at all. You were not respected. And so I think it was an interesting combination, when I graduated from IIT, that I started off in a system where the co-curricular, the extracurricular was emphasized. And in fact, it was emphasized so much that we used to call it the co-curricular extracurricular school. That's how the school was called. And then I think I've transitioned to a system where you focused only on your subject, but you focused really, really well. And the focus was not on, can you answer this question, but rather, can you answer any question in this field, starting from fundamentals? So I think that is sort of the background I came with when I came to the US. And so I think transitioning to a graduate school in the US was not terribly difficult in terms of the intellectual, background that was needed. But I think what was interesting about the US system was that they have resources, and they're willing to throw a lot of resources for small gains. Now, if you really think about it, the US research system is very competitive. Again, like Vivek was saying earlier, everything is a competitive grant. Okay, and the way the US system is set up is it's not, again, I've been to, not been to 119 countries like Dr. Sharma, but I've been to about 45. And what I've seen is in many countries in the world, when you look at the research enterprise, there tends to be an element of socialism. That if there are 10 professors and you have $1 million, and let's give everybody $100,000 and let's see what they do. In the US, it's winner take all. There'll be a competition and there's only one grant, it's for the whole million, and whoever gets it, gets it. But having said that, it is sort of a very, people have to realize that the research enterprise is very wasteful. If you look at what the reward is and what the cost is, because at the end of the day, you have hundreds of researchers, okay, working on a problem with the hope that one of them will become super successful, okay, or will lead to a breakthrough. But then it's not that the remaining are wasting their time. The remaining are, but just by working on this grand challenge competitive problem, they're training a cadre of people who can work on challenging problems. Maybe they were not successful in that particular one, but they are successful because they go on, they're hired by industry, they're already well trained. And in some ways, that has been the role of academia, that you train these people to be competitive. So again, sort of, if I look at my journey, and again, I went through, again, got my PhD, went through sort of the ranks I moved to Florida. Michigan was just too cold. 5 years of snow was enough for a lifetime. So I moved to Florida, went through the ranks, Florida State University, became full professor there. And then, it's one of those things where, you're always complaining about the administrators. And the only way to fix that is you become one. So I became department chair at University of South Alabama. So I did that for 8 years. And then I moved to Lamar University as Dean of Engineering. So did that for a few years. And then I became Associate Provost for Research. And then, at some point you get tired of the politics and say, okay, let's step back and do something different. And so now I'm basically, I am head of a federally funded research center, and we work directly with industry. So we are in touch with about 150 small to medium-sized companies. And medium by definition is less than 400 people. Now, there are 4 major refineries in Southeast Texas, in our vicinity, and about 200 to 300 companies that interact with them. So we are in touch with about 150 companies right now. We are in our second year. So again, if I look at my journey, it sort of starts with something which is not even educational. Well, it is educational, but it's not the traditional, read from a book and then you try to regurgitate that in a test, right? So it was sort of more, it was more enriching than that, which transitioned to something that is very focused, but focused on fundamentals, to something where it is very researchy in the sense you don't know the answer, your professor doesn't know the answer either. To a point where then I'm in the academic enterprise, and I've been in the academic enterprise for, for a long time, 28 years now. To sort of, you get to the point where say, okay, I have all this knowledge, how do I give it back in a way where people will learn? And you talk about US being an advanced country, people don't realize that less than 30% of the US population, adult population, has a college degree. And what does that mean? That means 70% do not have a college degree. That's the key statistic. We tend to focus only 30% who do. And the college education also is sort of very, very, again, if you just look at it from a resource allocation point, it can be very wasteful in the sense a lot of people, this 30% who have a college degree are not necessarily using their college degree for their job. You have to go in and, there are several professions where the college degree is a minimum requirement only because they want to eliminate a few people. You're doing, you could learn that thing on the job through 6 months of training, right? But what it does is college has a certain capability to enrich your knowledge base, right? And what we have seen is, again, I am not a good role model in this. I'm a third generation PhD. And my son is in a doctoral program now, so there'll be fourth generation. But we see a lot of people, especially in places like Lamar University, which is a regional, state-funded university, comprehensive university. We see a lot of first time. These are kids who are the first from their family to go to college, and frequently their college education is just getting the college degree, right? They don't really do a job where that degree is needed. But where the benefit comes is very long term. So basically their kids, when they go to college, they don't necessarily make the same mistakes that parents might have made. They get certain mentoring from home, which their parents might not have gotten. And then the next generation benefits because they pick the right major, they have the right enrichment, they do the right things and so on. So, and I have seen that. Now, of course, clearly there are people who bootstrap their way up, even though they're first gen, and the US is full of examples like that. Again, I've been to several countries, and if there's one country in the world where you can be successful with almost nothing, that's the US. Okay, but having said that, if you look at the averages, if you look at the numbers, in general, it's the next generation that benefits. So I think I like the new education policy that Dr. Sharma alluded to. And I think this is really, sort of the beginning. Then again, in India, it was always there, but it was sort of scattered, like my high school, like I talked about. It's what the government is doing now is something that we were doing in my school in the 70s and 80s, but it wasn't widespread. Now it is. I'm glad to see that. And I think this is really something that will benefit not only this generation, but really the next generation. Because that's where the fruits of this benefit will come. But I think we need to kind of go into this with our eyes open. If you want to look at quick rewards, then this may appear very wasteful. There are a lot of resources needed, and the benefits come very slowly, but they do come. And you will sort of particularly see the benefits of a policy such as this in the next generation. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Dr. Sharma, do you want to ask the next round of questions for the panel, or do you have any specifics?
I think what we would request them that we can have a winding up round from their side and let them give what suggestion they would like to give it to the Ministry of Education, Government of India, for the new education policy implementation based on their expertise, based on their experiences, based on what all. I would say we got beautiful three perspectives, so far. So that would be much better. And initially, like you were talking about, Dr. Kabir Sen, talking about music. Now, last 8 years, our chamber is working very, very closely onto that. And we are a strong believer. Now, I'll give you a small example. The northeast part of India, when we were talking about, there's a lady. Her name is Dr. Sunita Bhuiya. Dr. Sunita Bhuiya, right? She is teaching management and leadership through violin. And this all is going so well with the corporate sector and the corporate world. So thereby, the music therapy, I want to say, if you want to bring it in the education, I'm a strong believer that education should be fun, education should be stimulating, education should be rewarding, education should be linked up with some kind of an outcome. I would say not just gaining a knowledge or just gaining the wisdom. It's fine, that's okay. But somewhere today you got to understand the younger generation, and Dr. Srinivas touched some points very sensitively, very sensitively. The time is likely to come where in future, some of the students will be having more knowledge than the teachers, those are teaching. So you got to understand that time has gone when education was teaching centric. Now it is learning centric. And I got to understand, if I'm talking to a particular person, or if I'm giving 45 minutes of my life, what am I getting? What am I learning? What am I picking up? How it's going to be useful? How it's going to give me a new vision, new dimension, new tomorrow, new future? What exactly it is going to be? And similar way, our chamber has taken with about 170 corporate houses. Now recently, we have shot a letter to everybody that gamification in education is very important, because when I want to teach management, when I want to teach tactics, when I want to teach leadership, when I want to teach collaborative, when I want to teach where from to come, where to use the resources, whatever minimal you have got, how to make best use of that, gamification can be very, very meaningful as long as it is positive, it is talking positive, not like a PUBG that the child is sitting on the shit pot and from there he is telling attack from the left, go from the right and all that. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about positive gamification. We have written to the companies that even if you produce a games which are positive, which are constructive, which are creative, which are dynamic, nowadays, let's take a small example. If I'm making even a PPT to show to somebody, if I have got a GIF and if I've got a moving images, children enjoy more as compared to what a traditional PPT which I'm showing. There are so many things which are coming in a very big way. So when I'm talking about innovation and entrepreneurship, the world has moved on, and somebody has rightly said, 19th century belonged to Europe, 20th century belonged to US, 21st century belonged to Asia. And when Dr. Mandal was talking about, let me take that word once again, very interesting. There is a gentleman based out of Singapore. His name is Kishore Mahbubani. His book has come now, and that is. I know. And his book, if you go through, West, Now You Rest. And that is a book, every word, when you read between the lines, you will understand. So what I'm telling is that we got to learn from each other. We got to pick up from each other. And this particular round, the closing round, 5 to 6 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever each one of them they want to take on. My basic perspective is that I wish to have whatever is your expertise, whatever is your area, what would you like to convey to the Ministry of Education, Government of India? What would you like to convey to the Honorable Prime Minister of India? What would you like to tell the youth of India? What would you like to tell? The most important for me is teachers of India. It is the teachers, those got to go back somewhere, because education, I personally feel, teachers got to be empowered before we start thinking that the youth have to be empowered. Education has moved on, and this COVID has done something remarkable. Whatever was to come in next 10 years in India, it has come in 6 months in India, because everybody is struggling. And everybody is working permutation, combinations, and working hard. What is to be done, which way it is to be done, how flip learning, digital learning, blended learning, outside classroom learning, vocational skills, competencies, all packaged together. So there, I would like to invite a suggestion from all of you. And I think Dr. Vivek, you can take on, and further we can have a winding round.
Absolutely. Let's go around and let's go with that. Dr. Sen, over to you. The floor is yours.
I think I learned a lot from my fellow speakers. I think Dr. Palanki is absolutely right. At Lamar, we see first generation students. And sometimes, I'm not showing off. When I give them, say, an African-American student in my class, I ask them, okay, you heard of Beyonce, this Super Bowl concert, what was it in honor of? And she says, oh, they're the Black Panthers. So I said, name me one Black Panther. Can't name you any. So I said, have you heard of Eldridge Cleaver? Have you read this book, Soul on Ice? She said, Dr. Sen, you know more than my uncles and my dad know about these guys. Well, I read about it in a CPIM-led West Bengal where these leftist guys were very, very popular. But Dr. Palanki is right. The next generation will be much better armed from this generation we are training, which is the first generation. And the other thing is, it's not just the alphabets behind your names. I think my previous generation, which had, like my uncles and then my dad, they had far fewer alphabets behind their names than I do. They're much more knowledgeable in many, many areas than I am, because they just read a whole lot of stuff. One of the most renowned historians in America, one of the greatest historians on World War I, is a lady called Barbara Tuchman, who never had a history degree. She just read and read and read and read. So it's not just the formalized education, it is just reading and learning from any place you can get it from. And I think we must open our minds up to all types of influences. Again, if you allow me, there's this incident from my childhood. I used to listen to a lot of rock music, and I got hold of an album which was by a rock supergroup called Blind Faith. And I was interested in the interplay between the two guitarists. I was surprised that the drummer was drumming stuff which you could hear in a Durga Puja pandal in Calcutta. There were drums that were going all over. So my father, who was a tabla player, I played him this album, and he just stopped and he said, it's amazing. The Brits ruled us for 200 years. Nobody was interested in our music. After they left, they suddenly got interested in this music. So you could have the richest things next to you and not pay any attention. So you must be open to all influences, all disciplines, and read across all disciplines. In IIT, we had very good engineering professors, but we had very good history and English professors too. And some of us, we learned a lot from them. So be open to all disciplines. And sometimes the guys whom do not have those alphabets behind the names might know more about stuff than we would care to know. So that is my...
Casey, could you, I know you've always talked about the Silk Road example, and you've always talked about that Eric Clapton, I think, the signature example. Could you allude to that as well? I think that'll be very relevant to this panel.
Well, one of the things I always think, there's a book about the demise of the American high school education. It's called Shopcraft and Soulcraft. And it's basically that schools decided to save money by cutting out those pottery classes which Dr. Palanki was talking of. and just putting in these swanky looking computers. Do everything on the computer, no hands-on. So carpentry classes, metal forming classes, pottery classes are all gone. I think India should lead the way in finding out man's relationship to the surroundings, its materials, its environment, and we can learn from history. Like one of the three ancient rivers in Hinduism, Saraswati, is probably got affected by changes in the water basin and drying up of rivers, droughts. We are seeing what we in California, we must start relearning and break up some of the old forms of manufacturing, energy, balance between man and the environment, not just air and water, but our resources. And probably India might lead the way in creating a new way of looking at this and a new form of education, which starts right from high school.
Wonderful. Meanwhile, before I invite Dr. Mandal, I wish to make a mention that somebody who heard you in IIT Kharagpur, she is the chairperson of 35,000 students at present in India, and that is the state of Haryana. So she has joined this program, and she sends her compliment to you, and she is Dr. Preeti Lamba. Then there is a gentleman all the way down from Kerala, Anand Sada Sivan, and he is from the spiritual journey, you know, the discipline over there, the department what we have got, because today I was just going through. So he says, yes, sir, very true. Being open to all discipline is an important aspect of life, endorsing Dr. Kabir Sen's views onto that. Then there's a lady from Pune, Kajal Chatija. She says, wonderful, sir, future ready generation. That is something we have to. Then another comment has come, really our teacher should be good guide. Why next generation? Why only parents? Why not teachers can guide properly so that nobody can wait for the next generation? Why not to start right now? Why to wait for the next generation? So that is another new which has come. So Dr. Mandal, let's have your views.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Real-time feedback.
Yeah, I'm glad that people are listening out there. And okay, let me take one point. Dr. Palanki was mentioning. You know, we are a very fortunate country in USA, and more than roughly more than 30% of workforce don't have a college degree, right? Yeah,
No,
more than 30% of the
30%
population don't have a college degree.
No. 30%
Don't have.
have. He told 30% have.
No, that basically means there is a large proportion of the workforce don't have a college degree.
Yes.
Is that right?
70% don't have. Yeah.
Yes. So let me elaborate that particular point. You know,
Dr. Mandal, sir, I've got two more questions to be plugged in with that only. First of all, is college degree required? Number one. Number two.
Yeah,
now, number two, with that, is everybody meant for same kind of an education to go up to the same hierarchy? Because in Germany, in South Korea, in other places, where 97% is on the vocationals, everybody is focusing on vocationals. And today, because you served Singapore, you stayed over there, you know it very well. The technology and the technical university, how meaningful and how powerful it is. With these words, Dr. Mandal.
Okay, my view is this. We need technical skills, not the technical degrees. That's very important. The vocational training essentially built up the skill level within the people. See, if you are looking at the national development for a whole country as a whole, we do not need too many high-tech people as such. The high-tech degrees or the PhDs are required for research and development. But for the general mass, for the betterment of the economy, we need people who are willing to put their hands onto the machine. That's what it is needed. And for that, you need technical education. Let me let me give my own examples here. If I need someone, I run a business here. If I need my air conditioner is off, I need to wait 2 or 3 days to get someone to come and fix the air conditioner unit for me. Now, the whole problem there is the business is losing money. And that's why this is happening, because there is a huge shortage of technically qualified and certified workforce in this country, even though a large proportion of them are going through education. Now, specifically in the USA, all the industries are very regulated. And if you want to do any work, like if you want to do air conditioning unit, if you want to repair, you need to have a certification. If you don't have that, you would be sued. You'll be taken to the court. If something goes wrong with the air conditioner repair, and if your building or institute burnt out, you'll be liable for that, for compensation. You need to pay heavily. So that's what my focus is essentially is the technical education, entrepreneurial education, the education which is required at the grassroots level for overall, for the benefit of the economy, for the benefit of mass population. Let me put my voice into 3 particular areas, right? What I see, what I would like to see in the education policy. One is, which is rightly focused on what is called, we are opening up for students' choices. Now, in India, we are talking about, gone those days, like you need to be an engineer, or you need to be a doctor, or you need to be, that high government employed professional areas. Now, the students, working age students, like those who are 18 years to 24, 30 years, they don't want to go through the traditional means, traditional way. I believe that rightly. And they want the choice. Somebody wants to be a musician. Somebody wants to be a carpenter. Somebody wants to be a welder. So we need to give the opportunities to students. So students' choices needed to be respected. Once that is done, we need to look for industry needs. The industry needs qualified and certified people who really know what they are doing. An engineer nowadays, though we are all engineers, only able to go and repair an air conditioner unit. My case is that I do a lot of my own work. If anything goes wrong with my plumbing, I go and dirty my hand. I just go and repair myself. But if I mess up, then I call someone else, right? So what that basically means that everybody need to have the basic knowledge, and that knowledge is pretty much needed. And the industry needs technically qualified people who can be relied on to do the day-to-day jobs. There's a huge need for that. Third thing is this, on the education sector, how we are going to blend this students' choice and the industry needs. That basically is that we need to build up the huge infrastructure, educational infrastructure, and that you need to modernize with latest technologies, which is we are talking about the information technologies and all those things. Now, we need to find out the better way to give the skill education to a person who is living in the rural village. How do you do that? It's a big challenge for the policymakers, for the industry, or those IT companies. How do you make a high-class technical education available to a person in the rural village? You got to face that there is a huge digital divide. In India, we have cell phone to every person, but we have no landline there. Without a landline, without low bandwidth, how can you give an education like gamification? How do you give the simulation to a person who is living in the village? Think about it. You can teach a person in the village still how to do the plumbing work. That basically can be done through simulation, through gamification. Why don't we just develop those simulations or the games or the digital programs, put onto a computer and ship it to that person in the village? The person can see the work, the whole program, whole material, and then learn from there. And if that person needed to be tested, the testing can be done through text, cell phone. They can send the answer A, B, C, like the way we do the polling. You can send that the information over the internet, over the cell phone. So what we are trying to say is that you need to be innovative on the technicals in the information technology areas. And perhaps there's a huge challenge there, because you need to make this education available to everyone, not to those fortunate who are living in the cities. So my focus is on three things. One is you need to respect the student's choice. Second thing is you need to be mindful about industry needs, what industry really need, not to waste their resources. And the third thing is making the means available through the technology as such.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, this morning, actually, I was going through one of the deliberations, and well-developed country, when you talk about even United States, there's the latest information. How many people could not get the bandwidth or the connectivity during this particular pandemic? I have got the latest stats with me, which I got this morning. So that I think people should find out at their own, not to be shared over here. But there's one video which I would like to recommend all of us to watch whenever we get time. It's just 11 minutes, but it is a game changer. It's called Every University's Worst Nightmare. This is the title. Every University's Worst Nightmare. And that is by Valuetainment. This video must be watched. Those of us who are in education and people, those are listening world over, I would request, please do watch this movie, this particular YouTube video. It's 11 minutes, but it will give you insight that corporate houses are clubbing together and they are telling, hey, let's think about it. Do children got to go to colleges and universities? Or do we train them? Do we get them over here? And our staff, they will give them the skills and competencies what is needed. The future challenges which are coming, and that's why the Google, the Apple, the IBM, the Netflix, the Bank of America, there are about 13 corporate houses which have already got the list, and they are telling, we don't require your 4-year degree. We don't require anything of that kind. You just come straightway to us, be a part of it, and we would like to move ahead. So there are a couple of challenges in education system today. And what Dr. Mandal has mentioned, all three are wonderful suggestions, that we got to respect the student choice. We got to be mindful what exactly the corporate is looking forward to, what is the need of the corporate sector. And then at the same time, we got to make the means available to everybody. You'll be so happy to know that in a humble way, in a very polite way, during this pandemic, we are loading the content from somewhere and providing in the remotest part, somewhere in the farthest last one. And every week we are trying to send across to them so that they are not deprived and they also get that facility which others are getting. A lot of challenges are there, but they got to overcome. But your suggestions are very, very valuable and we respect them. With these words, I come to Dr. Srinivas Palankiji. Let us take your journey forward. Now, I think one point I left over with Dr. Mandal. I'm sorry, I will take both of you. Dr. Mandal, you made a mention somewhere that you have set up some entrepreneurship school in America.
Yes, actually, I own a private college.
Okay, could you just name it so that we can go through or some website or?
It's called Texas Health Tech Institute.
Uh,
Texas,
uh,
and then next word is health tech together.
Okay.
And the third word is the institute, Texas Health Tech Institute. Let me speak a couple of minutes on that.
Yeah.
This institute we started 10 years ago, and it's basically we are training the healthcare sector people. The programs are about 6 months, 6 to 7 months. And now these programs are actually, the students can get the financial aid and all those. There are bank loans and all those things available. But the beauty of this is once they go out of these programs, like the phlebotomist, medical assistant, medical billing and coding, all of them get job immediate. So after 6 months, they got into the job. That's all it is. And it requires only high school diploma to do that.
So,
and most of these people are those who want to make a transition from, they say, current employment. Like somebody is working on the McDonald's, they want to go and learn some medical skill, and then they can go and do this kind of things.
Okay.
Adult education.
Are we moving with health wellness also somewhere, or only health sector?
Well, health and wellness can be added, but at this moment it's more of a technical kind of things.
Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah. Because the projections which are coming for the future, particularly after this pandemic, people would be very scared to go to hospitals because they would not like to go to the hospitals. They would rather like to cure themselves Ayurveda based way, or they would like to have herbal medicines, because half the medicines are in our kitchen. Whatever our ladies, they prepare all the vegetables and vegetarian food and spices what we use. I think because initially Dr. Vivek or somebody started with the spices initially. So I think in future when we talk about the all research which we are gathering from world over, people are going to shift from health to wellness. Right. They would be moving more towards wellness, and that is the future innovation, strategies, and creativity, which is more. People have started growing their own organic vegetables now. People are working in that particular direction. So a lot is coming. Thank you very much for that input. I thought because I should take it. Now, Dr. Srinivas, I'm looking forward to a practical suggestion from your side. See, because this final round is basically, what do we wish to tell the government of India? What do we want to tell Ministry of Education? And what do we want to tell teachers? What do we want to tell students? Meanwhile, let me also endorse and convey thanks to Dr. Pushkar Giri. He has posted number of things. Thank you very much. Preeti Lama ma'am, you have clarified. I have got it. Thank you very much. It's wonderful. Balkishanji, thanks a lot. Thank you very much. I get, and from Arunachal Pradesh, there's a lady called Noi Nyodu, and she has sent the words Manipur, Julie Subba. She has sent across a lot of greetings and wonderful. Then from Yamunanagar and Delhi, Vidhi Kishore. So a couple of them, and Vijay Kumar Soniji, thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Kirti Munjal, how can I forget? I have to convey my thanks to you as well. People, those are posting, please, whatever suggestions you have got, do it, give it. And if you wish to ask anything, do let us know. Okay. So, Dr.
May I jump in? May I just take a moment? Gulshanji, just a fun thing, as you are reading out these names, it reminds me of the Binaka Geetmala that has to be done in All India Radio. You are keeping the viewers really engaged. So I think these are all things that there's a nostalgia to grow up in India. So anyway,
you will be surprised to know, Dr. Vivek, at this point of time, because this is the last program as far as evening in India is concerned, late evening. But in the morning, all the programs which we start, every question, we have got 1,000 rupees prize. Since morning, I think 20,000 rupees, 25,000 rupees has been distributed already. And questions are very interesting, very, very interesting and innovative questions.
So,
But
if I make one suggestion, at the end, we ask Dr. Sen to ask a couple of quiz questions because he's a quizzer at heart. So I think we should yield the floor at the end to that you can give to your people. Okay, Dr. Palanki.
Rather, I would request you, Dr. Vivek. My question is still unanswered from his side. That is how music should become an integral part of education.
Okay, we'll come to that at the end. And how quizzing also can be part of the curriculum. But Dr. Palanki first.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up on a few themes that Dr. Sharma had originally mentioned. So the first thing is, we are teaching, we are all teachers here in this panel. So we are teaching. The real question to ask is, are the students learning?
Yeah.
So I think that's an important question. And again, I sort of harps back to my theme on rote learning, right? That, you teach something, the students have to memorize it. They have no idea what it means, but that's the exam question. I mean, this has happened to me so often where people will ask this question, and it doesn't matter whether it's India or US. The question is this important for the exam? Now, one way of getting around that has been, this concept of project-based learning. And again, we did a little bit of that when I was in school. But I really saw more of it when I was in the US. And when my kids started going to high school, and they both my kids went to what is called the IB program, the International Baccalaureate program. You have that in India also in some schools, which really focuses on projects rather than, sort of the traditional exams. And I think what happens is, now there are pitfalls to that. And I'll give you an example of that in India a little later. But I think what happens is when you're focusing on more open-ended questions, it gives the opportunity for people to be a little creative, a little innovative. Now, not everybody will do it. I think the 10th grade board exam, some of the exams were replaced by projects in India. And the complaint I heard from some of my friends was that kids didn't know how to do it. And so parents did not know how to do it either. But if you went to the market, there was some entrepreneur who was selling for 500 rupees an entire project. Yes. So there is a little bit of entrepreneurship right there, if you think about it. However, what I want to focus on is there will be a small minority of students who will take this upon themselves and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to, I may not be the best in math. I may not be the best in physics, but you know what? I can do this project really well. And so there's an opportunity there to learn something and learn something really well. Now, the question of, is college for everybody? And what is the point of college? Why do people really need the 4-year degree? So here is the question. Your vocation does not necessarily have to be your avocation. I tell this to people all the time. If you look at smart people are frequently good at multiple things. That's the reality. And what I used, again, I've been in a situation where, parents will come with their kids and they will ask me, what do you think my kid should do? And frequently these parents have not gone to college, so they're depending on me for sort of a good answer. And I always tell them, look, if your kid is really, really good at one thing and one thing only, then they should pursue that. And that might be music, and that might be dance. It might be art, it might be engineering, it might be medicine, doesn't matter. If they're really, really good at one thing, that's all they should do. Now, if you tend to be good at multiple things, then, again, I used to tell them, and the parents like it, the kids don't necessarily like it. But I think if I use my own example here, again, when I was in high school, I was really interested in history. Now, in the late 70s and early 80s, when I was in high school, you couldn't really make much of a living with that. And so I chose my second option, which was engineering. Now, what engineering has done for me is I've been able to go to 45 countries, and I tend to go to countries that have a history. And I've taken, my wife and my kids to many of these places, and they have actually been able to learn a lot about things just by sort of going and observing. And we have a fascinating time looking at, like you go to a country like Turkey, you go to a country like Egypt, these are old countries. And you can kind of compare, okay, how do their histories compare with, say, the history of India, which has an old and rich history itself on its own. So I think what happens is if you have a vocation that funds your avocation, that's sort of a great choice. So again, college really sort of opens up your mind in terms of these sorts of things. You can explore things that may not become your vocation, but it gives you the opportunity to do it. Not for everybody. I'm not saying that 100% of the people should become college educated. That takes time. And that's sort of what I was alluding to in my earlier comment that, if parents have college degrees, that kids tend to have a slightly easier time in the sense they understand, why am I learning this history class if I want to be an engineer, right? So I think that takes time. So I think it would be great if we had an educated population in general. Again, and if you want to sort of popularize democracy, see, democracy assumes that you have an educated population. And if you don't, then, again, if you look worldwide, you will see that democracy has done great things. But then there also have been effects which are not necessarily great when you have the majority oppressing the minority. That can happen unless you have an educated population. So I think college education is important in itself, not necessarily for a job, but just to become a better person. Now, in terms of what exactly do you need for your job, that vocational training is invaluable. You do need that. I mean, finally, at the end of the day, and again, if you think about it, the first college that started in the US, I think, was Harvard University, like 1600 something. And the whole point was you'll go there and you learn to be a good person. Nobody said anything about that leading to a job. And a lot of the liberal arts education that you see in the US, especially in the Ivy Leagues, and both my kids are in Ivy League colleges, so I know, it was based on this premise that you just want to be educated, not necessarily that this education to lead to a job. So I think those are sort of two different things. You obviously don't need a college degree. And again, I give this example, Bill Gates did not finish college, right? Now, that doesn't mean everybody should quit college. You have to realize Bill Gates went to Harvard and he was a bright student. He and Steve Ballmer were classmates. Steve Ballmer later on became CEO of Microsoft, right? Remember, Steve Ballmer's dad came from humble beginnings. Steve Ballmer came from humble beginnings. He actually finished college. Bill Gates, on the other hand, his dad was a millionaire. He could afford to quit Harvard and start his own company and see what happens because he knew Harvard would take him back. So I think college is important. It's not necessarily the only thing, but it helps you grow. And certainly there are entrepreneurship opportunities. And, there is a certain corporatization that happens, when you go towards project-based learning, I think like the example I alluded to. I mean, I'll give you another good example. I'm on the review board for Gujarat Technological University, their master's and PhD programs. And it's very interesting. And I go there every year and I'm on their evaluation board. And what is really, really well done is the fact that there are more than 100 colleges that are under the umbrella of GTU. And they all have to come and make a research presentation once a year. And there are, I think, 25 of us who are on this panel that come from the US. And what I have seen is, so there are two things. The first thing is there is a certain commonality to the way they present. They all have used the same template. So there is corporatization going on already there, right? That they all have to follow that template. Now, again, it's a small number of people who actually really, really understand the research and do well. The rest of them are basically using this as a way to train themselves. So it's higher than vocational because finally these are master's and doctoral level students. They are not quite at the level that we see here, but they're not that bad. And again, I see, out of 100 students that I look at, I will see 4 or 5 that are really, really good. They could be as good as the people we see in the US. So I think it benefits to have these sorts of programs. And I think that's really well done in my mind. Now, of course, there will be some who will just do this once and they'll never ever do a research project again. That's okay. they've learned something. They at least know what excellence is. And they probably realize that they are not excellent, but maybe they can get the next generation to be excellent because they understand what excellence is and they understand where they were deficient. They can understand what they should have done earlier. And I think so. I think the future is bright. I'm very, I'm positive by nature.
Positive.
Yeah, but
Wonderful.
I just see a lot of good things happening. I think India has overcome the basic, I mean, I remember when I was growing up in the 70s, food was rationed. You actually had to have this ration card, and then sugar was rationed, right? I feel that for a large number of people, this roti kapda or makan has been that's a solved problem. I'm not saying it's not there, it is there, but I think it's a solved problem in some sense. I think the next thing is education. So I'm very optimistic that good things are going to happen.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think on the popular demand of Dr. Natarajan, we got to bring Dr. Kabir Sen. Yes. He has a popular demand. Dr. Vivek Shankar Natarajan ji. Yes. And meanwhile, let me read three comments. Project-based learning should be implemented, and we learn a lot from peers. And nowadays, students are examination-centric, not forgetting the knowledge. Plenty of information and knowledge is available on the mobile phone itself. Why do you need that kind of an extra knowledge? What exactly do you want to get? Wow. Okay, please go ahead.
Well, Vivek has put me on the spot. But Dr. Palanki has raised some very good points.
Yes.
I think the value of college, it sort of formalizes many things, gives you some discipline. I'll be very honest, I'm taking myself as a guinea pig. Vivek knows I use a software program called SAS. My wife has certified in SAS. You can put that behind you. I don't have the discipline to do that.
What is the program?
Palanki is right. We need that. College instills some discipline in you also. Otherwise you have a knowledge of many things which you are not really putting to some good use. So back to Vivek's question. I often think that I had a boss in India who was Cambridge educated. His last name was Singh. And he had some qualities which I don't think we have anymore, which is he would dictate, call a secretary, make her sit down, dictate a whole, without stopping, a 10-page report. And then she would type and bring it to him. Hardly any changes. I think using Microsoft Word has, it spoiled all of us, right? We probably didn't have it in the first place. Second is, he would notice stuff which came from the numbers, but if you just look at the numbers overall, you wouldn't notice it. He had the ability to note certain stuff. That why did this ratio go up suddenly when there was nothing happening? And most people would overlook it. So sometimes I come up in a question in class saying, I'm going to give you a factoid. Well, this might not interest people outside America. But there were 2 court cases which went to the Supreme Court. Each involved the last rites to a person who was going to be executed. In the state of Alabama, the person said that I have converted to Islam in prison, and you're giving me a Christian priest. That is not the right religion for me. I'm now a Muslim. Unless you give me a Muslim imam, it's not fair to me. It went to the Supreme Court. I don't know how long it took, but the Supreme Court immediately came back and said, nothing doing that's not a sufficient reason. Few months later, a similar case happened in Texas, where this time the prisoner said, I've become a Buddhist. And you've got an imam and you've got a Christian priest, but you do not have a Buddhist priest. And this time, one Supreme Court justice, Kavanaugh, changed his vote and said, we can stall that execution. So I stopped the story there and I say, what is the little bit of extra information you would need from this case to have a better view of what happened? And there's a guy in my class who's since graduated, who used to always come up with these things. He said, what about the race of the prisoner? The first case, it was African American. In the second case, it was a Caucasian. So the data which we have, look just not at the data, look behind it and see what is missing probably. That might give you a better insight into what is happening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Very kind of you.
Yeah. In fact, I would, Gulchanji, I just want to have summary response to what Dr. Sen and my other panelists said. Actually, econometrics, in fact, yesterday I was listening to a big lecture by one of the founders of system dynamics. So he was talking about why economics is kind of rooted, it's all about curve fitting, and he was criticizing it. And a lot of times economics has been, and that's a mother discipline for all of us in marketing and management, to criticize. But now there is a refreshing approach. There is actually a young economist of Indian origin who's turning it back on its head. His name is Raj Chetty. And all he's doing is empirical work. And the kind of questions that Dr. Sen talked about, he's trying to answer it with data. So data has kind of become the new oil, the new engine, but data doesn't equal to knowledge. You need to have some tools to make data into information, and then that has to transform with theories into knowledge, and from experience you get wisdom. So internet will only give you data, or access to all that opens a plethora of data. Like I was giving the example of the Ganges. It's like the water, and we have. In fact, when I said Bengal, it's interesting. We have Casey and Kabir and Punen, both are from Bengal, but I'm named after a Bengali, and you went to a Bengali, school or inspired school. So all of us are Bengalis in some sense. Dr. Palaki too. So, the Faraka Barrage, the Ganga, when it comes to Faraka Barrage, I've been told, I've not seen it. It's almost like an ocean. But unless you have a dam to harness it, and that is the education system. So we have all this information that is coming, and information it's value neutral. I mean, you get as much good stuff, you get a lot of Bhagavad Gita, but you also get a lot of pornography too. So how do you make a value judgment? And that technology does not teach. And for that, you need critical thinking. And that's where education is still imperative. Now, the structure can change. Maybe it might come from, online education. It might come from institutions that are new. It might come from across the globe, but still the paradigm of education doesn't change. The value add, it needs to happen. So with that, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vivek Shankar ji. My deepest regards and gratitudes to Dr. Kabir Sen, Dr. Purnendu Mandal ji, Dr. Srinivas Palanki ji, and of course, Dr. Vivek Shankar Natarajan. It was a pleasure to have all of you with us. Thank you very much for your valuable time, your valuable inputs, and what all we have got it from your side. We would certainly endorse that, and we will put into our final blueprint what we are making. Till 31st of December, we are going ahead with this vision, and thereafter we will see how it takes its shape and what exactly it moves on. Should you have any other people of your choice to whom you would like to recommend, we are looking forward at this point of time, the new education policy 2020, how, pragmatically it should be implemented. And children, those are going to join this particular new education policy 2020. Teacher empowerment is very important. Vocational is very important. Skills are very important. Competency is very important. At the same time, nobody should be coming out from there without something in their hand, whether they go for entrepreneurship, they go for self-employment, they go for startup, they go for anything. But I think they should not be asking for employment. Rather, they should be becoming self-employed. That is the focus in realistic terms we have to take on. That part is very important. And at the same time, once again, we look at the statistics and data. 1.6 billion US dollar equivalent is the loan which students have taken in America, which they owe to the government banks. I'm not talking about the private banks, the private borrowing, I'm not taking into consideration. So how education ecosystem will further proceed, what exactly will happen. Second wave is coming, third wave is coming, so many things are happening. Nobody knows when the vaccine will come, what would happen, what shape it would take. And there are so many things which have to be taken into consideration. But one thing for sure, if we want to make world at peace and a better place to live, we all got to spend less amount on arms and armaments, but we got to invest more in education and human wisdom. That part is something very important. And education has to be directly linked with what is the purpose of education. That means what kind of an opening I'm going to have after this. That is something is very, very important. My deepest gratitude and thanks. Wish you all a great day ahead. Wonderful day. So ladies and gentlemen, world over, green morning, green afternoon, and green evening. Thanks for joining us. Look forward meeting you next Sunday at 8 p.m. in the morning of America and evening of India. And then, of